It is done. Oh god, I'm so sick of this project. We have 3 rooms left to build today, one of which proved to be a boon as I made some little trinkets that ended up being some of my new favorites. And then it was out to the garage to set up the entire dungeon for the grand tour. Although I am not painting my garage floor this time. That was at the previous house. And frankly, it was my only mulligan. Roll it! Well, it's done, and I did it, and it's done. There's really not much to say, so we're going to go straight to the crafting table. I will waste no time with a heady preamble. I will not build this up or create hype. I will give you no deluge of platitudes about what a journey it's been. I will not bloviate or wax poetic. I will respect your time and keep this viewing experience about you, not about me. I will give no reflection nor genuflection. I will not sit here and harp on things that are going to be covered in the video anyway. I will not stall. I will not delay. We need to get right to the crafting. You've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for this. Why would we procrastinate? In other words, I will not waste your time. I will not waste a single second. Moving down the hallway into room 23, the floating stream. Water not only flows through this room, it floats. Entering a hole in the western wall 2 feet off the floor is a stream seemingly suspended in midair. It flows out of another hole near the northeast corner. On either side of the door are a total of 6 kayaks, each able to carry 2 riders, but there are no paddles to be found. Interestingly, this room in the 3rd edition module says several rectangular platforms lean up against the near wall. And since those are a lot easier to make than kayaks, I'm going to go with that interpretation. Here is some crafting twine and some small wooden dowels. Toothpicks would also work. I bunch about 6 of them together and lay down a bead of hot glue, maybe a 1/4 inch in from the edge, and then with plenty of excess, lay the twine down in it. And this will bind together the sticks. After doing that on each end of the raft, the loose ends can be wrapped around the top and then back to the bottom again, where another dab of hot glue is used to secure them in place, and the excess cut away. From there, it's a matter of painting them, and as I've said many times before, this folk art asphaltum color is just excellent for getting a rich, vibrant wood. So there we go, cheap and easy rectangular rafts. However, what I've also stumbled on here is I really like this aesthetic, this color combination. So for in future projects doing like forts or shanties or, I don't know, anywhere I need rope and wood, I like this color combination. Gotta keep this in mind. Anyway, I made like 8 or 10 of those, I can't quite remember, and hot glued them so they're leaning against the wall in the room. Now this floating stream of water that it's talking about, I'm going to use some 1-inch thick polystyrene to start with. Then I draw out the shape on a grid of 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares so I know exactly where each of the 2 rooms is going to begin and end. That is cut out with a hot wire, freehand, and then traced onto some chipboard, graphics medium chipboard. Manna from heaven. Once that's been traced, I can cut away the sections that won't be there. So this will allow the chipboard, which is the surface of the water, to sort of float in midair. The 2 chunks below it are the support structure, and I'll just make them look like a tunnel wall or a cavern wall or something like that. But this way I don't need clip-ons, and I can literally like put the rafts and or the miniatures along the river if they take the battle into the tunnel, which I think is kind of the point of the encounter. We'll get to that in the next room. But anyway, to texture it up, I didn't feel like doing tinfoil and waiting for Mod Podge, so I did my old hot glue trick, thick bead along the bottom, and tease it upward with the nozzle. Make it look like a droopy cavern. The paint is nothing special. I'm using my usual black and gray and barnwood for the cavern wall. And then there's a dark blue and a lake blue and a really light blue dry brush to make the water stream. Not on camera, I also hit it with some gloss varnish. And so here's the idea. You can see the wall sections meet up perfectly with the structure, and chipboard is pretty rigid stuff, so over a short distance like this, it stays hovering in the air just fine. Will easily support the weight of a tiny plastic miniature as well. I wrestled for weeks with a way to do this with resin, but I couldn't figure out how to get like a curved and also cupped half tunnel or half pipe, if that makes sense. At least not without a tremendous amount of math and tedium. So I took my own advice that I've espoused multiple times recently and just acted. Gotta get over the analysis paralysis. And it looks fine, it's functional, and it's colorful. I like it. The stream goes into room 24, Sir Bluto's guard post. A fallen knight named Sir Bluto Sans Pite, a neutral evil champion, and his 8 minions wait here to ambush any who come through the tunnel. It's a weird name. I think he's also a fallen knight in previous printings, but I just found 8 warrior-looking miniatures that I have that are the same. Base coated them with 3 colors and gave them a strong tone wash. The Army Painter method. Love it. 15 minutes of work. Done. So here he is, Sir Pluto Sans Pite. I have no idea what that name is supposed to be. I keep thinking it's like a pun that I'm not getting or something, but whatever. Here he is with his guard. Now there's a secret passageway connecting room 24 with the hallway to room 25. And for this, I'm doing just what I did with the Tomb of Horrors secret passages. Secret passages are chipboard, 2.5 inches wide, so it's a flat 2D tile, and I just paint the passage in the middle and black out on either side of it. This makes it very visually striking against the normal room tiles, and by being different, just adds a little something. It's also a lot easier to construct. For real long passages or complex shapes, you gotta tape multiple sections together. I just use packing tape to make hinges. Well, we did room 26 back in episode 5, so we're going to move on to room 27, a luxurious prison. Lavish furnishings and decorations are everywhere in this large room. The floor is strewn with rugs and cushions, and tapestries cover the walls. A hookah as tall as a human stands in one corner. The largest piece of furniture is a sumptuous divan? I don't know. What is this? Ah, okay. It's a couch. It's a fancy couch. Alright, so I'm thinking this room is fancier, it's finished, it's not carved out of mountain. So once again, I'm going to take a tip from myself in the Tomb of Horrors build and make this a mosaic floor. This one, instead of blue, will be tan. So it's a base coat with a cream tan flesh color. Then with multiple paint brushes of sizes and shapes and thickness, taking a light brown and streaking on some, well, streaks. And then doing the same with a sienna color. Once that's totally dry, I chop them up into squares, mix them up really good, and then attach them back onto the tile. From there, I gave the whole thing a nice black wash, 1 part black paint to 10 parts water, to tamp it all down. In hindsight, this mix was a little bit rich. It dulled it down more than I would have liked, but that's okay. Rugs, just like I did in the werewolf's room earlier. These are print and paste from Google Image Search, glued onto some cereal box and then cut out and hot glued onto the floor. Now the hookah, that's interesting. I've never made one of those before. I pulled down this bin of arcane looking beads and found a few that I think would stack well together. So with a single toothpick or wooden dowel through them and some super glue, I assembled the body of the hookah. Here's some high gauge, thin black electrical wire. Actually, I think it's microphone wire. So I stripped away a little tiny bit and then hot glued it into the top. Wrapping that around decoratively so it looks sort of like the inspirational artwork from the 1E module, and super gluing it to the body of the hookah, and then a final bead to serve as the, pipe end. And here we go with a halfling miniature for scale. This halfling is Kesnif, who is actually an Oni, or an ogre mage in previous printings, currently in disguise as a halfling. And this is a neat little trinket. I was really happy with how 2 minutes of work came out. I was cruising, and it's really gonna fit the room well, like color palette wise. Sweet. Now for the fancy couch. Look at this. This is a toy finger skateboard. I'm gonna take the sticker off and pop the wheels out, and this forms a great base for the body of the luxurious couch divan. Then I have a jumbo popsicle stick, and I'm just going to freehand draw out a curved sort of shape for the back of it. And this popsicle stick can be cut with a good fresh crafting knife or utility knife, just using multiple passes with light to moderate light pressure. It can be done. And then a little bit of sandpaper to smooth it up. Very nice. Now this plastic needs to be primed. We're going to use God's Gift to Humanity, Rust-Oleum 2X Flat Gray Primer. Best spray paint on planet Earth. And this is some crafting foam sheets. It's not foam board. It's very thin, very flexible, almost like a fabric. I've never used this before, but many others have. It's a popular material for crafting. It's just something I've never really liked to use. Till now. Perfect for the couch cushion. So after tracing and cutting out the shapes I would need, I used a mechanical pencil with the lead retracted to sort of push in the pin cushions. Or I guess they'd just be the pins in the cushion. Whatever, it's this look that you see on fancy furniture. Alright, and another touch, back to my wooden dowels and some of these Celtic looking beads that I found in my collection. I'll put together a headrest, 2 of them, 1 for each end of the couch. Then it was time to assemble, so I put the seat cushion on and those 2 headrests and reprimed it. I guess I could have waited for that. And while the primer was drying, I hit the back with my asphaltum color. Now, since the divan is described as sumptuous, I'm thinking it's made of gold. So I'll start with some Army Painter Bright Gold. Their metallics are my favorites. And then a manual brushwork to get an alien purple. This is a nice, rich, royal purple. I hit the cushions with this. Then it's time to shade everything down. Army Painter Flesh Wash, not dark tone or soft tone or brown, but their Flesh Wash over the gold gives a wonderful, rich, rich gold color. I love it. Then, of course, the purple gets washed with purple tone. It's time to attach the back, so I'm going to scrape away some of that paint so I get raw plastic to super glue to. And then super glue is used to attach it with some patience. And then the back cushion is attached in kind. And the fancy couch is done. Well, except for one final little touch. So this little thing, it took like 30 minutes to do, and after Googling what the couch was, I saw this skateboard in my toy collection, which I haven't used in 6 years. Thank God I didn't throw it away, because this has ended up being one of my top 5 favorite things I have ever made. I don't know why. I'm just so happy with how it came out. I don't know. Again, I'm lucky that I met a woman early in life. But look at it, isn't that cool? Miniature furniture? I don't know. It makes me want to start like a whole line of miniature furniture or dedicate a whole episode to it. I got plenty of other ideas. All right, anyway, next we're going to move on to the tapestries that are hanging on the wall. I'll be back in 8 seconds. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. More Google image search and print and paste. More wooden dowels, painted with asphaltum. And then these printed up tapestries, which I mirrored in Photoshop. I just fold them in half and glue them together. Easy as. Now, rather than make a whole bunch of individual clip-ons for each of these, I'd like to have a contiguous wall. So I made one of the larger clip-ons I've ever made. This thing is like 10 inches long. And I found these tassel things in the clearance section at either Michael's or Hobby Lobby, I can't remember which. I've had them for a couple years now, and lo and behold, thought of a use for them. Just glue them on in between the tapestries, alternating. I also bought a 3D model and printed it and painted it for the Ogre Mage portion of Kesnif. Again, it's just a 20-minute speed paint with base colors and washes over that, no highlighting. And so here's Kesnif mirrored in his halfling form and as an Oni, or Ogre Mage. By the way, these were printed on my Elegoo Saturn II 8K. I did a video on that a while back. It continues to be an absolute champ for me. And as we look over this room, I'll read to you a little bit about Kesnif from the 3rd edition printing of this module, because it is longer. Kesnif the Ogre Mage has been living here since he lost a wager with Caraptus, and he spends most of his time trying to figure out a way to pay back the wizard for this indignity. Currently, Kesnif appears to be a well-to-do halfling. He claims to be a halfling warrior named Fensic, who has been held for ransom by the horrible wizard Caraptus for several months. A detect evil spell reveals a faint evil aura emanating from him. If possible, he'd prefer to avoid combat. He's perfectly willing to accompany the characters out of the dungeon, since doing so would end his confinement. If given the opportunity, he might use his Charm Person ability against an unwary PC, but he only does so if he thinks he may need an extra friend. If his false identity is discovered, Kesnif immediately turns invisible and slips away to a safe corner. On the next round, he uses his Slippers of Spider Climbing to move onto the ceiling. Once there, he uses his Darkness spell-like ability to sow confusion among the characters. After a few rounds, he dismisses his polymorph effect, resumes his normal form, and retrieves his greatsword. Only then does he actually attack the characters, either using Cone of Cold or delivering a greatsword attack against a single enemy. If reduced to 10 or fewer hit points, Kesnif assumes a gaseous form, and, while still cloaked in darkness, slips inside his great hookah. Oh, so that's why it's in this room. Then he simply waits until the PCs leave his chamber before returning to physical form. Lastly, escaping the dungeon. On the way back out, the party will run into 2 Ifrit, Nyx and Nox. So once again, I bought a 3D model, printed 2 of them, based with black, gave it a zenithal with some Army Painter uniform gray, and then white on top of that, and then layers of red and orange inks. Here's a mega close-up of them. Nyx and Nox waiting back at the entrance. As we now take the grand tour of the entire dungeon set up in its completeness, I will describe to you the legacy weapons stowed away in White Plume Mountain. There are 3, and here is their lore. Black Razor, Sword of Souls. Black Razor is a great sword that appears to be forged from an unknown alloy of steel. It is sheathed in a black scabbard decorated with pieces of cut obsidian. It is a +1 weapon with a value of 2,350 gold. Omen. When held, Black Razor shines like a piece of the night sky filled with stars. Its wielder hears faint whispers whenever it delivers the killing stroke to a living creature. History. No living being can positively identify the material from which Black Razor was crafted because the sword comes from another reality, now long dead, whose physical laws varied from those defining the multiverse known to today's sages and planeswalkers. In the dying days of that reality, the wizard Kereptis brought the weapon out of its native multiverse into his own. In truth, Black Razor's current form is not its true shape. Originally, the great sword was a living creature, a native of the strange multiverse Kereptis visited. Through a strange ritual practiced by the denizens of that dimension, Kereptis bent first the entity's will and then its form until he had the weapon he desired. The rulers of Black Razor's home dimension were powerful beings who controlled all known planes of existence within their multiverse. Order was absolute. Entropy and decay of all kinds had been virtually eliminated, but despite the power these rulers wielded, their control eventually faltered, allowing horrible creatures to pour forth from forbidden realms into their multiverse and poison all of reality. In its original state, Black Razor was not a living being. It was a powerful undead creature, similar to an Atropal. In fact, the entity known as Black Razor should never have existed, either in our reality or its own. It was one of the first horrid creatures to invade that long-lost multiverse, and the rulers of that dimension were all too eager to eliminate any evidence that their control was not as absolute as they would have wished. Thus, they granted Kereptis the knowledge to bend the entity into its current form as payment for taking it from their realm forever. The second legacy weapon is Wave. Wave is a trident whose head is forged of steel with a distinctive blue-green sheen. The wooden haft is intricately carved with fish, twinning seaweed, and similar aquatic motifs. It is a +1 weapon with a value of 2,315 gold. Omen. Anyone who clutches Wave constantly hears a sound like that of distant waves washing against some unseen shore. With a round of concentration, the wielder can sense the distance and direction to the nearest body of water of at least pond size. History. According to legend, the trident Wave was forged by giants who were imprisoned on the desolate island called Thunderforge by agents of an ocean deity commonly called the Sea Queen. The first hero to wield it was the half-giant Dravenda, said to be the daughter of the Sea Queen herself, who used it in rebellion against her mother's servants and paid for her insolence with her life. Dravenda used Wave in her epic battle with an enormous crab that was supposedly another of the Sea Queen's offspring. Dravenda fought bravely, but she grew weaker and weaker as the battle raged on. Finally, while held in the crab's huge claw, she managed to hurl her trident into a gap in the creature's adamantine plating, killing it instantly. Dravenda died in battle the next day, and her kin buried Wave with her. Shortly after Dravenda's death, the notorious wizard Kereptis encountered the imprisoned giants of Thunderforge Island and agreed to help them win their freedom. In return for the magical aid he provided, the giants exhumed Wave from Dravenda's tomb and gave it to him. Kereptis carried the weapon with him in his travels before he eventually settled in the mysterious volcano known as White Plume Mountain and disappeared from history. Some 100 years ago, a group of powerful heroes calling themselves the Brotherhood of the Tome entered White Plume Mountain, fought the monsters still living there, and returned in triumph with Wave and other assorted treasures. A ranger named Elfin claimed Wave as his own,
and carried it during his later adventures, long after the Brotherhood of the Tome had been disbanded. Eventually, Elfin retired from the adventuring life and married, but tragedy struck on his wedding day. Shortly after he and his bride boarded the Asterion for their honeymoon journey, a sudden storm struck and the ship foundered. Elfin survived thanks to Wave's magic, but his new bride drowned, although legend says that her spirit somehow joined with the figurehead of the ship. Elfin blamed the Sea Queen for his wife's death and swore an oath of vengeance on the deity. His quest for revenge brought him at last to Thunderforge Island, the birthplace of Wave, where he confronted an avatar of the unknown, but Elfin and Wave both disappeared. Decades later, the trident reappeared in the possession of a wealthy collector. The third and final legacy weapon is Whelm. Whelm is a plain, unadorned warhammer with a haft made from the golden wood of the ginkgo tree. When the weapon is wielded, its steel head glows with a soft silver-black light. Omen. Whelm glows more brightly when you endeavor to assess items of value. The more valuable the item, the brighter the glow. This effect grants you a bonus on appraisal checks. History. The hammer known as Whelm appeared most recently about 20 years ago in a dwarven community beset by ogres, though no report of its creation by those dwarves exists. Wielded by a dedicated dwarf soldier named Tenmir, the weapon proved quite powerful against the clan's enemies. Tenmir later left his ancestral home to become an adventurer, and he and the weapon promptly disappeared from sight. Long ago, Dagnall Mightyhammer was a skilled weaponsmith of the Dankill clan. She labored at a time when her clan had suffered grievous losses from a large band of vicious trolls. When her husband and shieldmate Trauban decided to lead a counterattack against the trolls, Dagnall created a mighty warhammer, which had no name at the time, putting all her love for her husband, her commitment to her clan, and her devotion to Moradin into it. Trauban and his warriors proved victorious, and Dagnall's weapon was much praised. In the years of prosperity that followed, Dagnall imbued the warhammer with the ability to sense gems, gold, and other riches, so that it might become a valuable tool in both wartime and peacetime. Many years later, the dwarfs were threatened by hordes of goblins led by bugbears. Dagnall, now an old woman, again sought to improve her masterpiece so that it might help vanquish the current threat. Trauban, though he was old and in less than perfect health, insisted on going out with the vanguard of the counterattack. The dwarves were again victorious, but Trauban was mortally wounded in the fight. The weapon was returned to the clan with its owner for burial. Overcome by grief, Dagnall threw herself on her husband's corpse and promptly died. The two dwarves and the weapon were interred together in a single grave. At the time, many said that the three had shared one spirit, and that Dagnall and Trauban had put so much of themselves into the weapon that it had become much more than just steel and wood.
Well, what a ride. And if somehow this is your first exposure to making stuff for your miniature tabletop gaming, you should know there is a group of 40,000 strong on Facebook, the Tabletop Crafters Guild. Lots of resources there to get you started. Also, in my video backlog, I have all kinds of projects, including a couple videos aimed at absolute newbies, people who have zero assets, diving in for the very first time. If you want to support me, there's links in the video description below. You got Patreon and Amazon, but my modules for D&D are on Etsy and or the DMs Guild. If you want to support me one time, cheaply, that's a good thing to do. Check out the modules. They're pretty good. They're not great, but not bad, they're good. Thank you so much for watching. I will now rest. I'm Wylock. Make things and play games.